For more than 50 years, I thought my favorite childhood TV series would remain a memory of a distant past. Virtually no one I asked knew of Pipo on Bizarra, and the footage was nowhere to be found. Recently, that changed. Not only was I able to watch the series with a modern-day perspective, but shortly afterwards, I suddenly found myself face-to-face with the boat that took Pipo to the White Island in the Mediterranean. This 1972 television series captured my imagination so much that after every episode, I would write out the entire storyline. I formed my own band of robbers and was determined to one day see Pipo's idyllic White Island with my own eyes. The Pipo in this series was different from the well-known clown. This Pipo wore a red bow tie with white dots instead of the other way round. He also had a different Mamelo as his wife. Pipo had exciting adventures on Bizarra, and the surroundings were breathtaking. A rocky island, white, empty beaches, and a deep blue sea. This dream destination turned out to exist in reality under the name Ibiza. As a 10-year-old boy, I first heard about the series thanks to a visit with my father to the Recreana holiday fair at the Frieslandhall. There, I was handed a Bizarra TV guide featuring an image of Pipo with a red bow tie on the front. Together with the Native American Kluk, he braved the Mediterranean waters on a pedal boat. In his hands, he held a large yellow lucky egg. When we got home, my father tried to dampen my enthusiasm for the photos of the band of robbers. It was the Bizarra guide, so caution was called for. I understood that Bizarra was a red broadcaster. Perhaps that explained the red bow tie. At the start of the story, Pipo and his entourage turned out to be on a coaster from Delfzijl, caravan and all, which was taking them to the White Island of Bizarra. Yet it wasn't Pipo or Kluk who made the series so irresistible to me, but the villains who were wreaking havoc on the island. Malo and his cronies were holding a meeting in a candlelit corner of a remote cave. Every time Malo banged his fist on the table, his friends would hold the candle aloft. Blue Hilda, played by Adele Bloemendaal, who was playing chess against a cheating octopus, also captured my imagination. This mermaid or sea woman would ultimately play a crucial role in the battle between good and evil. Thanks to the opening of the Sound and Vision archive in Hilversum, I've managed, more than 50 years on, to watch Pipo on Bizarra again. The pace was agonizingly slow, there was little dialogue, and the music came from a mediocre little organ that played the same tune over and over. But the setting was just as fascinating as it had been back then. At that time, Ibiza hadn't yet been overrun by tourists. The island looked pristine, empty and vast. The story centered on the sun hatching the lucky egg. The Bizarra ethos came across beautifully when Pipo didn't keep the lucky bird for himself, but gave it the freedom to spread happiness to everyone. He even let the crooks go in the hope that they'd learnt their lesson. It was also nice to see how mermaid Blue Hilda gave housewife Mamelo some feminist advice. However, the real Pipo was less enthusiastic about the series and took the makers to court. The court ruled against him. He'd overplayed his hand by demanding a salary that was far too high. Just a few weeks later, my memory of the Pipo series was rekindled in a completely different way. I'd arranged to meet a former colleague for a bite to eat in Ridderkerk. Whilst waiting for him to arrive, I looked at the boats in the little harbour next to the restaurant. My eye was caught by the stern of a grey coaster bearing the place name, Delfzijl. It wasn't a large ship, but it bore a striking resemblance to the one that had transported Pipo to Bizarra, particularly the way the stern rose out of the water. I made a mental note of the ship's name, Nordborg. When I got home, I looked up information about the ship. To my considerable surprise, it turned out my imagination hadn't run away with me after all. The Nordborg, the last remaining original Groningen coaster, had actually served as a means of transport for Pipo, Mamalo, Kluk, Nono, and the parrot. After some online research, I was able to piece together the history of this remarkable ship. In January 1962, this coastal vessel was launched by the dock and shipbuilding company Mackem. The motor vessel was intended for Wagenborg, a shipping and forwarding company based in Delfzijl. The coaster of the so-called smooth deck type is 48.5 meters long and nearly 8 meters wide. The engine has a power output of 240 pk. Following a successful trial voyage on the Isel Lake, during which the ship reached a speed of 9 knots, it set sail for Delfzijl. Among other things, the Nordborg transported timber from Scandinavia to the Netherlands. During a voyage to Malmö in 1969, the Nordborg was involved in a collision. The captain, who thought he knew the waterways well, was at the helm himself. He did not consider a pilot necessary. The vessel veered too far to port, causing the captain of a German seagoing vessel to become disoriented and ram the coaster amidships from behind. The Dutch captain got off with a reprimand. Less than 6 months later, a second incident occurred. Whilst turning into the Van Haringsma Canal near Franeker, the Nordborg swept an entire petrol station off the shore. The petrol station attendant escaped with a fright. He had been having a coffee elsewhere. The Pipo series was filmed in 1970. Every morning, the crew set off with their caravan and their donkey, Nononono, on board. Filming took place on the Ems Sea. In 1991, the Nordborg ran aground at Wells next the sea. The ship, which had been declared a total loss, was refloated and towed to Dordrecht to be scrapped. However, the coaster was saved from the scrapyard by Dick van der Kamp. In 1992, the ship was renamed Casper. It was sold as a houseboat and moored in Zaandam. Herman and Lidwina Klassen lived on the Casper until 2009. In that year, van der Kamp bought the ship back to restore it to its former condition. Van der Kamp restored the coaster to its former name. 2 attempts to bring the vessel, which costs just €125,000, to Groningen have so far come to nothing. The Appingdam Bronze Museum, which currently has no fixed address, wanted to convert the vessel, which still has an original bronze marine engine, into a floating museum, but was unable to raise the necessary funds. Wilhelmine on Rust of the water transport company Hansetrans is, however, able to afford the vessel. The municipality of Groningen has not yet granted permission for the Nordborg to drop anchor in the Danish harbour behind the Groningen IKEA. The last remaining seaworthy Groningen coaster would fit in perfectly there. In this way, this piece of heritage will still be given a worthy home. Hopefully, they will then set aside some space on the ship for a modest Pipo museum.
Dit ei is geen gewoon ei, nee, dit ei komt uit de diepte der oceanen en de verste verten der tijden. Luister, zeeman, als dit ei zal worden uitgebroed, zal er een vogel uitkomen, een prachtige vogel, de geluksvogel. De geluksvogel zal zijn eigenaar geluk brengen, overal en altijd, overal en altijd, overal en altijd, overal